Good morning. So I just wanted to log in early in case anybody wanted to ask any questions. Hi, good morning. So the way I thought this might go is I would open up the chance for you to ask questions about any of the practice ones you've done that you really kind of want to know the answer to. And you can turn on your audio and ask, or you can put it in the chat and you can put it to everybody, or just put it to me. So we can do that, or we can just go through the, I think there's 45 claims that were at the end of the prepare for the exam lecture notes that I uploaded. So does anybody want to start with asking any questions? All right. Then I'll just proceed, and as you have questions, just please ask them, because I want to hear from you what you thought the claim was. And you don't have to put it in the chat to everybody. You can just send it to me, because that gives me useful feedback of how to explain the answer. But if there's no questions, then I'll just proceed. Yeah, all we're going to do today is categorize claims. All right. Okay. So the angrier people are, the more they participate in politics. What do you think this is?
General predictive causality?
Exactly. General predictive causality. If you would have said, my friend Sam participates because he's angry, then then it would be historic event causality, strangely, because historic event causality just means there's something that happened that caused something else that happened. It doesn't have to be like something you would learn in history class or something like that. Somebody's asking where to find the flow chart. The flow chart. Well, first of all, I can email it out. I've got just a single PDF of it, if that would be helpful. But it is maybe the third lecture. I don't know. I'm going to have to get back to you on that. I'm going to look at the chat and get back to you on that. But one thing I can do is just right now, if people would find it helpful, send it to everybody. Because that flow chart is helpful, isn't it? Let's see. Oh. All right, I'm gonna have to do it later. I can't find it exactly right now. Yeah, I'm gonna have to find it and send it on. Okay. And if anybody else remembers which lecture it was, you should put that in the chat. The exam is only identifying claims. You've got 25 claims. I've put some kind of 250 in there, and you're going to get a random sample of 25 of them. That's the way it works. Okay. Yeah, so I'll send it out. Would it be helpful if I actually found it right now so you could look at it as we're practicing this? Because I can try to find it. Let's see. Um, lecture 2. It's week 2, lecture 1, I think. Yeah. Week 2, lecture 1, and it's slide 53. If that helps. Here's what I'll do. Okay. Okay, so I sent that out. There we go. Thank you. Now we got it in the chat. Y'all are better than I am. All right. Okay, so we'll go to the next one. The ban on solitary confinement can be deduced from the underlying logic of the other rights and liberties protected by the Constitution and the Bill of Rights.
Verifiable.
No, definitely not, because most people believe the solitary confinement is constitutional. So arguing that it's not constitutional, that the practice of solitary confinement is not, that it should be banned, would not be a fact, or, it's not verifiable. It's not something everybody looks at and can see. And there's some key words in here. So first of all, as soon as you're mentioning a text, it's either verifiable as suggested or text interpretation. Now, the key here is can be deduced from. Because as soon as you say that, then it requires logical deduction. It requires, thinking about the meaning of the underlying. The underlying logic is another one that should scream out to you, text interpretation. Yeah. So, but I like your thinking on the verifiable, observable. And I kind of wish if this was my world, solitary confinement causes such significant brain damage. It would be better to just pummel somebody every day, but that is also not verifiable, observable. It's just that, that's something that people observe correlates with. But as soon as you see can be deduced, underlying logic, something like that. Anytime you see a text referred to and you've got a lot of stuff inside quotation marks, then you can go look to see if that phrase in quotation marks is there, so that's how you would kind of determine the difference between verifiable, observable, and text interpretation. And here's what I would say. The fact that this is not verifiable, observable makes it an argument that would be acceptable in my constitutional law class. This is an argument. You'd have to really, trace through the various rights and liberties that would lead to this conclusion. and it would have to be sort of a careful argument. Now, we saw a careful argument like this on a different topic. Does anybody remember what it was? Griswold. Griswold makes the argument that banning contraception is unconstitutional because of the penumbra is what they call it, that is derived from the actual rights and liberties, right? I don't know what Bohr is, but Griswold, yes. Now, somebody mentioned possibility of historic event causality. And so first of all, I think just a few states have banned solitary confinement. I think New York is one of them, or California is one of them. I can't remember exactly. Otherwise, it's allowed. But you might say California banned solitary confinement because their governor is a Democrat, or because the California population trends toward liberal. And if you said that, then that would be historic event causality. But here, they're giving a rationale, a reason for banning solitary confinement. And rationales and reasons are text interpretation and not causality. So that's what I would say. Oh, Bill of Rights. Yeah, Bill of Rights. Right. Griswold deduced the ban on contraception is unconstitutional because of the Bill of Rights. But they don't claim that the Bill of Rights said that, right? They claim to be making an argument. And in a way, Griswold is both a normative argument and text interpretation. I mean, many of you might know that right now the Colorado ballot case that banned Trump from the ballot is being argued in the Supreme Court right now. I mean, you can go to any news agency, click on, your audio and listen to the oral arguments being made. And the kinds of arguments that have been made are historic event causality. Why did such a case get decided the way it did? They're looking at historic event causality of why certain text got written into the 14th Amendment. They're making meaning of events because they're Trump's lawyers trying to argue that the president is not an office holder. So the president never held office is basically what they're arguing. And so they're looking at Trump being a president, and they're putting the meaning on it that it's not an office holder. They're name calling whether it's an office holder or not. And they're also doing a meaning of event over whether January 6th was an insurrection. That's another definitional, like what constitutes an insurrection. The exam is multiple choice, where literally the 6 choices, verifiable, observable, normative, like all the choices are in the answer list, and they're in the same order every time. And I've got a claim, and all you have to do is select that claim. Now, if you want to defend your answer, then you need to open up the assignment, the exam defend your answer assignment, like I sent out in the email yesterday, and it also shows in the instructions of the exam. You open up that, and if you want to, or if you feel that you were really trying to decide between 2, or you were unsure if it was this or that, or maybe you thought it could have been 3 things, and then you're trying to say, okay, this is why I finally decided it's a verifiable observable. But you have to copy paste the claim, into like, it's like a table. It's in the form of a table. You copy paste your claim and then you put your rationale next to the claim. And I give an example of one that I'm just trying to make you laugh for anxiety, people who have anxiety in tests. And so you don't have to defend your answer. I mean, if you don't really know why you're picking what you're picking, I wouldn't defend your answer because you're not going to get any credit for it. But I might decide, oh, a reasonable person could have read it that way and give everybody credit for that answer. So that might be something I would do. The other thing is I might give you credit or partial credit because I liked the way you reasoned through. And your reasoning tells me, okay, that person understands that skill. So I'm going to give them credit for the answer anyway. So there may be something like that happens. Yeah. So you might say, I was trying to decide between this and this, and what you got was the right answer, but the other one what you got was the wrong answer, but the other one was the right answer, and you're kind of explaining your logic, then I might give you partial credit. Because it's one of two rather than one of six, like it's just a random guess or something like that. Okay. All right, so this one I'm on the fence about, but let you tell me what you think. Counties that had lower rates of COVID-19 were less likely to have their hospitals overrun with COVID-19 patients. What do you think? There's actually a couple of reasonable answers here. Okay, historic event wouldn't be anytime you mention counties. If I say Harris County was not overrun by COVID cases because they did not have very many, in the hospitals because they did not have many people that had COVID, that would be a historic event. But as soon as I'm generalizing to all counties and I'm correlating, like imagine when you're trying to decide between historic event causality and general predictive causality, you have to imagine a scatter plot. And imagine on the x-axis, I've got COVID rate in that county. And on the y-axis, I've got hospitals being overrun. You've got dots in the scatter plot that are counties. But if I'm talking about Harris County and an attribute that Harris County had, and another attribute that Harris County had, that would be historic event. So as soon as you're mentioning multiple units, people who are more likely this, countries that are more likely this. Over time, you see more people in jail, depending on whether the Supreme Court has been pro or anti-liberty. That is more general predictive causality. That's one of my hypotheses that I'm working with right now. But if I say the Supreme Court decided that Trump on the Colorado ballot case because it's mostly Republican, that's historic event. All right. Yeah, so this is general predictive. Okay, so it's general predictive, but there's another reasonable answer to this question. And it's not historic event. No, it's not normative. Now, I like your thinking on normative because I want you to be extra special sensitive to normative claims. Now, it might have normative implications about whether people should mask or, something like that. But this is just a scientist, like you could give an alien from outer space, you could give them the statistical tools, tell them the measures of counties, and that person, without knowing anything about the politics of COVID, could say there's a correlation here or there's not a correlation here. So somebody says verifiable observable. Does anybody want to defend that? Just to see how you might defend one answer versus another on the exam?
I said verifiable observable just because the beginning of the claim is saying like counties that had lower rates of COVID-19 were less likely to have their hospitals overrun. I feel like both sides of the claim are just saying the same thing. If there's less COVID in a county, their hospitals aren't going to be as overrun.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like you're saying Y equals Y, right? COVID cases are more likely to happen where COVID cases are more likely to happen. And I like that answer. And in fact, that would be my favorite answer for this one. And the reason it would be my favorite answer is not necessarily because general predictive causality is wrong. I would give credit for general predictive causality, but it's because I want people to be aware that this right here is not science. And the reason it's not science is because it cannot be wrong. And, you know, you could say there could be a lot of COVID rates, but they're not very serious. So then they don't end up in the hospital, or there's some, you know, just sliver of uncertainty here. But really, these are both the same thing. And so what I really intended with this one was verifiable observable, even though I would give credit for general predictive causality. And the reason I like verifiable observable is because I want students to be aware that this would receive, if you try to make this argument in my data science classes that I teach, if you tried to make this argument, I would say, I'm sorry, I'm giving you a 0. You need to try again, because I don't, this isn't science. This isn't non-obvious. This is just 2y equals y. So, all right, the Supreme Court has allowed too many criminals to go free.
Normative.
Normative. So if I say too many, who is this person? Describe some attributes of this person. They're conservative, right? They want criminals in jail. They're certainly not like, right now we have a movement going on that is trying to abolish prisons. And they don't actually want to let all the prisoners go. Basically, they want to make prisons obsolete because we're taking care of the other social problems in society, preventing crime, is basically their kind of argument. They are not making this argument, right? It's somebody who is like, law and order, and I follow the law, so you should follow the law. Meanwhile, they drank and drove last night, something like that. Maybe. I'm just so aware that everyone throws the word criminal around, not being self-aware at all that they are criminals. All right, so yeah, normative. Too many, too much, too little. Anything that describes this, the person, in order to agree with this, you'd have to agree with their politics. And that makes it normative. All right, when people put an emphasis on their relational aspect of their identity, they are more likely to accept disagreeable political outcomes than people who put an emphasis on their material identity. So this is an argument that is made in the procedural justice literature, that some people know who they are from where they exist in relationship to other people. They know who they are because they're part of a family, because they're part of a friend group, because they're part of a city that they feel a part of because of their neighbors or something like that. And other people, they know who they are because they drive a nice sports car, or they have a nice handbag, or they have, you know, right? Like that, you know, they've got some wealth to display, right? And poor people can have material identity, you know, just as much as rich people. So This is more like where you get your sense of who you are. General predictive causality, exactly. And notice that you cannot make an argument that this is verifiable observable. People knowing who they are because of their relational who they are, versus what they own, that is not the same thing as accepting disagreeable political outcomes, right? Those are very far apart, and that's what makes it good science. All right, good. The founders of this country put quite a lot of thought into the Bill of Rights. Therefore, we should not include other rights. It's a little bit of an oxymoron. Exactly, normative. And lots of people make this argument. You know, there's a joke that do you know how liberals count to 10? They say 1, 3, 4, 5, right? And the same joke could be made for conservatives, that conservatives get up to, you know, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10. You know, they would skip over the Ninth Amendment. Nevertheless, okay. Jokes on political opponents aside. All right. When people feel a strong sense of self-efficacy, as though they can make a difference, they are often more likely to participate in politics. General predictive causality. You know, self-efficacy is measured with questions like, I feel like if I had something difficult to handle, I feel like I could handle it. And participating in politics is like protesting, voting, joining a political party, canvassing during an election, you know, things like that. Those are different things. All right, red state, those tending to be Republican or conservative, electoral votes can be reliably counted as going for Republican presidential candidates. I like verifiable observable for this one, because it's like you're calling it a red state because it tends to vote Republican. Like that, you know, that's the definition of a red state. And so it's like saying red states act like red states. If you could provide some sliver of doubt that those two things are different, and if you defended your answer or something like that, then I'd be happier. But this is really verifiable observable in my mind. Yeah, okay, so somebody was asking, what would I take? I would only take general predictive causality if you had a reason to say that being a red state is different from voting for Republican candidates. Like that, like it might not, or you know, it's, you know, we may as well already count Mississippi's electoral votes right now. We don't have to even ask the question. You know, we can just count them up. Same thing with California, count them up, you know. Whereas, well, Colorado used to be completely red. When I started here 25 years ago, it was completely red. Then it went to purple. Once we started having elections that made it a little bit easier to vote, we went purple, and now we're blue. So states can change. So if you made some kind of argument like that, you know, then you'd argue that they're actually different things. But this is, again, this wouldn't be science. I'm not being a scientist when I say we could count Mississippi's electoral votes right now. Yeah, Y equals Y. All right. We need to think of a way to punish Assad non-militarily, oh, typo, for using chemical weapons. So verifiable observable would be so by the way, that I came up with this claim 10 years ago when Assad was using chemical weapons on his own people. And, Obama is sitting there wondering, well, do I strike or do I, how do I, have, economic sanctions or what can we do? So I think this would be normative. Like we should, must be our kind of normative arguments. We must not eat meat is normative. And so, I mean, some people obviously think, and my memory is now, I can't remember whether Obama struck Assad militarily, but I think he did. He used military weapons against him for this. So, I mean, we just used our military to strike Iran and for, I don't know, funding the Houthis, I think is what we're angry about. So yeah, normative, because not everybody agrees with this. Most people thought the military was the way to go. This I also put on my exam sometimes because I'm just trying to lighten the mood. This is a joke that Texans say about Oklahomans. You'll notice in a few claims from now, people should stop making stupid jokes about Oklahomans. This is normative. Oh, that's hilarious. Verifiable, observable. But the debate between University of Texas and the University of Oklahoma will continue until the apocalypse. But it wouldn't be verifiable, observable that Oklahoma sucks. Everybody, I mean, right now it's so sad Toby Keith died and everybody in Oklahoma is sad. So we should not make dumb jokes about Oklahomans today. It's terrible. All right. Okay. Shoot, I can't read the top of this. The Bill of Rights were never meant to restrict the states. Therefore, we can infer that the founders were willing to accept the oppression of religious minorities at the state level. Text interpretation, that's correct. And we can infer that in a sense because only 2 states guaranteed freedom of religion at the time of the founding. And that didn't change until 1960 or 65, somewhere around there. Nobody thought you should prevent the states from establishing religion until 1960. Well, I shouldn't say nobody, but it was not law anywhere. Okay, radiation caused Marie Curie's death. Verifiable, observable, exactly. Verifiable, observable. We know that that's how she died. Okay, egalitarianism in Scandinavia caused them to become Vikings. It's historical event causality. Yeah, I mean, Vikings would think it's great to be a Viking. By the way, not all Scandinavians were Vikings. Vikings was a word for a profession, not a group of, not the entire society. And so historians make this argument that they had a level of egalitarianism that died when, what king was it? Forgot his name. When he took over, he started wanting to be the only Viking. So he started clobbering all the other Vikings, and then the Vikings era sort of died. Yeah, so this is historical event causality. Right now, we're not judging, and this sentence, this claim, is not judging egalitarianism or anti-egalitarianism, and they're not judging Vikings. They're just literally trying to look at what happened to find out, well, what brought that about, is the argument. So that's a historical event causality. If you would have said egalitarianism is sometimes bad, look at what it did. It caused Vikings to become Vikings, then you'd be normative. Democracy is the worst political system except for all the others. This is a famous quote by Winston Churchill. Normative, exactly. Normative. And I would tend to agree with this. It's like, you know, we just got to prevent the most worst outcomes. Police have to knock first before entering because of the Constitution. It's not normative because it's not saying police should knock first. It's saying police legally have to knock first before entering because of the Constitution. So, okay, so I would accept verifiable observable here. I would accept that. If you made the argument that we know that that's that everybody agrees that that's what the law is, kind of thing. Another answer is obviously text interpretation, that people are looking at the Constitution and they're saying, wait a minute, you have to knock first. And it doesn't exactly say police must knock first, but it talks about a warrant and it, you know, you're kind of deducing a little bit. Certainly people disagree that the Constitution requires this. The anti-liberty folks. All right, so what I mean by this is text interpretation, but I would accept verifiable observable if you gave the reasoning that we know this to be current law and everybody can see that it's current law. The police, without any probable cause, cannot just barge into my house right now, not legally, right? Okay. Oh, we already had this one. Okay. According to Steven Pinker, there has been less violence in the 20th century than ever before. His book implies that he would agree with much of what Hobbes has to say. Text interpretation straight away. Yeah. You know, I've read Pinker's book, but I haven't read it carefully. Does he exactly say, I 100% agree with Hobbes? If he did and you found that page, then we would be saying it's verifiable, observable. But all of this business about implies means that you're taking two texts and you're trying to argue that the underlying logic is similar. That's text interpretation. Here we go. Now Oklahomans are getting back at the Texans. They, you know, and poor Oklahomans today, really, with the sadness of Toby Keith dying. Okay. Last time we went out on a Tuesday, it did not rain, so we shouldn't need our umbrellas tonight. This is a dumb historic event interpretation, you know, historic event causality. You know, it's like, I don't know, like it's a full moon. And that's why I drank so much last night or something. It's just kind of like a dumb historic event causality. But that doesn't make it not historic event causality. It just makes it likely to be not very well evidenced. And I see what you're saying with normative. Okay. And that's why I have this on the practice is should has two meanings in English, right? And I say that because, well, I guess it's true in German too. Soll has two meanings, but in this sentence, should means it's predicting it's not going to rain. It's like there should be a full moon tonight, so we should be able to see the stars. Doesn't mean we should morally be able to see the stars. It's a different meaning of should. So I like that you're like zeroing in on the word should here, but the meaning that's implied by should here is a prediction, not a moral imperative. It's you're not a bad person if you forget your umbrella. You just predicted poorly or something. All right. So be careful with should and its predicting the future meaning of it. Okay. People ought to study if they want a good grade. Here's another one like this. Now, I'm curious to see what you all say to this one. All right. Normative. All right. Like, if you went back, if your parents are paying for your education, and when you went back to your parents and you said, okay, mom and dad, I really just don't think I should be studying, they might call you a bad person, right? In a sense, right? They're going to say, no, you're wasting the money. I'm getting emails from financial aid going, are these people participating? Because if they are, we're going to revoke their aid. I mean, they believe there's like a moral imperative to participate in class and study and that kind of thing. And so if you made an argument that not studying is wasting your parents' money or something like that, then you could really go with ought is a moral imperative. All right. So, but there's another possibility here that I'm not seeing in the chat. So first of all, do you think some people might get an A without studying? Maybe they're doing something else to get an A. I don't know. They're, coming and listening, but they're not studying their notes, something like that. General predictive causality, right? Saying people in general, if they want to effectively bring about a good grade, studying is the thing that causes that to happen in general over a course of a lot of students, right? Some students might study and not get a good grade. And so that's why it makes it general predictive causality. And it's not, my friend Sam didn't study, and so she didn't get a good grade. That would be historic event causality. And so there's a little bit of a implication of causality here, despite the word ought. And so even though these words should be like in flashing light and should make you think, wait a minute, is that person being normative and they're calling people bad people for not studying, then we're having ought. But if they want to get a good grade, implies that studying causes getting a good grade, which would be general predictive causality. So here's one where I would accept normative if you made the claim that you interpreted this, that people who didn't study were bad people. And I'd need to see that in the justification to accept normative, because what's implied here is causality. And it's implied general causality across all these people, not just one person or yeah. All right. What Trump did on January 6th was insurrection. Supreme Court is going to be deciding that very soon. Okay, so I had a conversation in office hours that I think might be helpful for this. People are arguing that what's happening in Gaza right now is a genocide. And we're calling, and some people are arguing it's a genocide. South Africa has made the claim legally that it legally constitutes the legal definition of insurrection. And so you have to go in and really study the meaning of the word insurrection, or go in and study the meaning of the word genocide, and then attach what has happened to that meaning. And this happens a lot in the law. Such and such constitutes historical discrimination. I mean, I'll give you an example of this. When the Supreme Court was trying to decide whether gay people should be protected from being fired at work. And does anybody know what year gay people finally got the right to complain if their boss told them, you're gay, so you're fired? Does anyone want to guess that year? 2022. All right. Some localities and states had banned it, but federally, it's been banned since 2022. A good almost 2 years. All right. But the reason the Supreme Court said was that discrimination against gay people is not historical discrimination. We're discriminating against them right now. It's not in history, it's current. Literally, they look at the word historical and they say it doesn't, it doesn't meet that definition because historical means it happened in the past. And because it's happening now, it's not historical discrimination. And therefore, we should be able to continue legally, not morally, legally to allow discrimination. You're gay, you're fired, period. Not like you could read into it or, that kind of thing. So this is the meaning of events. It's attaching an event to the definition of the word, to a meaning of a word. And it always, a careful one, requires a careful attention to what the meaning of the word insurrection is. Was January 6th an insurrection? I don't know. And the reason this is not normative, okay, is because some people might agree it's an insurrection and still think it was a good thing. Some people might say, well, what's going on in Gaza is not technically meeting the definition of genocide, but it's still wrong, right? I mean, we attach the connoting of words with their meaning. And we think, well, people know that genocide is wrong. And that's not true in a way. Some people are like, great, genocide is great, but usually because people are so obsessed with, well, once it's a genocide, now we have to stop doing it because then it would be immoral. Then they start picking apart whether it's actually genocide or not. And meanwhile, people are suffering. And everyone can agree on that. And that's what Hobbes would say. Every single person can look at what's happening in Gaza, whether you think it's a good thing or not, and you call it suffering, right? That is a word that can be easily attached. But we get caught up in these other words because they have normative implications, but really just attaching events to a meaning of a word does not have to be normative. But it often has normative implications. And these arguments, 98% of the time, these arguments happen. They're idiotic, but lawyers do this well. So the best way to study for an exam is to get together in study teams and create some practice exam questions. I've made this argument to some students. Okay, so we've got normative out there. And the only way you could make that argument is if I'm telling people to do that, if you think I'm telling you you're a bad person, if you don't do that, then it's normative. But if you think I'm just trying to make a causal argument that generally students will do better if they get together in study teams and practice exam questions, then it's just causal. And it's trying to say that generally people will be better at the exam if this is what they do. And I believe this causality. All right. I mean, in a sense, that's what we're doing right now, right? The financial crisis of 2008 lowered the rate of divorce in 2009. Oh, somebody wants to go back and says, but wait a minute, this is the best way. And I see the point about the best way. I mean, people would say the best way to prevent getting COVID is to get a vaccine. So other people disagree with that. Even some medical doctors disagree with that. And they're not really calling people who get vaccines or not get vaccines bad people. Now, maybe they are. Maybe, maybe they're loose in their logic and they're like, well, I mean, the only way to protect yourself from COVID, the best way is to get a vaccine. And so you're a bad person if you don't, because then you'll get COVID and spread it to somebody who could die. Then they're talking about the moral qualities of somebody. But good has two meanings. You could be a good person, or it could be a good way to create an outcome. And I think in this case, it would be harder to argue that, like if you said mom and dad, I didn't get together in a study team and create practice questions. Your mom and dad are not going to be like, you're a bad person. But if you say I didn't study, they might, right? And so that's where it becomes a little more easy to argue normative on that one. And this one is harder to argue that if I make this argument to you, you don't walk away thinking, well, if I don't do that, Professor Baird's going to think I'm a bad person. And I wouldn't argue that at all, you know? So that's why the best way in this case is not normative. So you really have to kind of take the statement in and of itself. In a way, your job doing this exam is you're doing text interpretation, right? You're interpreting the words on the page. And if I say what's happening in Gaza is a genocide, then you know that I think it's bad, right? Likely, right? But if I say it's not a genocide, do you know I'm saying it's okay then? Not really. And that's why I want you to be really critical of people who just swish around in these lanes and argue about people are good people and this is a genocide and that's a insurrection. And, you know, you could argue that what happened on January 6th was not an insurrection and they still murdered police officers. And technically, all of them legally are guilty of felony murder, even if they didn't do anything to that police officer. I mean, if you go out with your friends and you're all in a car, your friend goes in and does something that ends up getting the convenience store clerk killed, the friend comes back to the car and you drive away, even if you don't know what's happened in that store, you could spend the next 20 years in prison. That is the legal definition of felony murder. Felony murder means you were part of a felony. You drove the getaway car, right? There's nothing to say that you didn't know what was going on in there, and somebody died. So you were committing a felony and somebody died. You're spraying graffiti and then somebody trips over your can that you're spraying with, suddenly you've got felony murder, something like that. I mean, it's just definitional. In any case, you can argue it's not an insurrection and still say those people were bad people. All right. All right. The financial crisis of 2008 lowered the rate of divorce in 2009. And actually, I looked this up because I was kind of curious because I've been interested in divorce lately. Not because of reasons you might think, but because having been divorced in the last year quadruples the chances that you will believe violence is a good idea. Those people are 4 times more likely to believe that police should, you know, shoot handcuffed people and, you know, we should shoot protesters and that kind of thing. And so I've been like, what in the hell's going on with that? You know, so I was kind of curious. And I saw that the rate of divorce was much lower in 2009. And then now I'm like trying to act like a historian going, why? You know, and it might be because they couldn't afford to get divorced. I don't know. People, when they're in crisis, they huddle together, you know, maybe something like that. I don't really know. But yeah, this is historic event causality because it's not true. It's not the first thing people would think when they're looking at divorce trends is they're like, oh, wow, you see this dip in 2009. It must be because of the financial crisis. Maybe it's not that. All right. The U.S. Constitution dictates that Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of the press. That is not text interpretation because it exactly says that. Now, I don't have quotes in there, but you could look it up and see when they mention the press, this is exactly what they say. Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of the press. This is a direct quote, so it's verifiable, observable. The Ten Commandments implies that its readers should not kill unnecessarily. That if it's necessary to kill, it's okay. This is text interpretation, because all it says is thou shalt not kill, right? And theologians have just poured ink upon ink upon ink, arguing about when it's okay to kill, given what it says in the Ten Commandments. So it's a text interpretation. If it says the Ten Commandments says that, people should not kill, it could be more of a verifiable, observable, because it does say that. But then people would think, well, wait a minute, what if I'm defending my life? And that kind of thing. I can't read the top of this. So, oh yeah, this is my pet peeve. People like to say, well, Gen Z has this quality and Gen X has this quality and millennials have this quality. And, people my age are just nonstop complaining about the youth today. And I can't stand it. So this is like, there are 1,000 other causes of a person's attitudes and behaviors that are likely more effective at changing the nature of a human besides the year of their birth. It's arguing that generation is not a cause, which is, by the way, a causal inference. To say X does not cause Y is a causal inference, right? And so I'm, the person who's written this sentence, who's me, I mean, I've written them all, but I'm not behind them all. I don't agree with them all. But this one really irritates me because you all run around with a ton of people who were born about the same year as you. And I bet you see as much variation as I see among people who were born the same year I was. And so this gets to me. But I put this in here more to give you a reason to be irritated when people complain about the youth today, which we've been complaining about since Socrates, at least. And but I'm also making the claim that X does not cause Y is a causal inference. So I'm just keeping on going. We're past the time, but y'all are here and I'll just keep on going if that's okay with you, but you're not required to be here at all. So please stay on and I'll just keep going if that's what y'all want to do. Or watch it later. I mean, I'm going to upload the Zoom as soon as I get it. I got a heavier sentence than my prison friend for doing the same crime because the judge heard my case at 11 a.m. and heard hers at 1 p.m. Yeah, thank you. Good luck. This is historic event causality. And people have made this claim, general predictive causality, that people get heavier sentences before lunch as compared with after lunch. Kind of interesting. Millennials' views of global warming are more important since they're going to suffer the worst from its effects. That would be normative, right? That's normative. Somebody's saying that the defend your answer section is not allowing to type anything. Let me work on that. You need to open it. And it should allow you to type in the boxes. But if it doesn't, let me work on that and get that fixed. Using an ethnic or racial slur is racist. I have my favorite answer, which is verifiable, observable. It's like one of the only things everybody could agree on as racist. But you could also call it meaning of events, that slur is racist. Might not be exactly sure. People protest if their friends think protesting is a good idea. That's a general predictive causality. So someone said in the recitation that this was normative. You know, if you put in the defend your answers that somebody is complaining about protesters and that all they're doing is following their friends, then I would accept the normative. Oh, the ones about the slur. I mean, look, the word racist has come to mean bad, you know. To me, the difference between normative and the meaning of events is when the word that's the adjective is more specific. And so if you're arguing that everyone agrees racism is bad, and so you're just calling ethnic slurs bad, then defend your answer. In your defend your answer, I would accept normative in that one. But it's basically just calling that slur the definition of the word racist. And I kind of wish racist had a more narrow definition than bad. But you know, that is my wishing that words mean something. So I would accept that normative. I certainly think people who use ethnic slurs in order to hurt people are bad people. That's what I think. And maybe a lot of people agree with me about that. And so then you could call it verifiable observable, or you could also call it normative, because do you think there's not somebody in a 25-mile radius right now saying an ethnic slur on purpose to be cruel? People are doing that. They think it's good to do that. And so, like, you know, I disagree with them. On the other hand, if you said, you know, that clerk gypped me by 20 cents, you might not realize that's an ethnic slur, and it's meant to be racist against gypsies. Scotch tape is an ethnic slur because the Scottish, and you'll note that my name is Scottish, are known for being frugal. And so Scotch tape is tape that doesn't have very much adhesive. It's chintzy with its adhesive. And so something like that. This is historical event causality, and whoever said that should feel very good about their skills, because this is a hard one to figure out. But we're talking about the belief that exists that if there's any doubt about something, it's not science, which implies a like percent of people who believe that. It implies that we're in a state that many people believe that. And we've been doing this thing over a period of time. And it's not like sometimes we teach one way, sometimes we teach another way, sometimes we teach another way. And that's why it's not general predictive causality. So historic event causality is the right answer here. And that's a hard one. I've tried to keep really hard ones like this off the exam, but in the practice so that we can practice the hard ones. When millennials came into adulthood, they were not acting like adults. Now, usually people are saying, you're not acting like an adult. They're meaning normative, right? But literally just adult has a definition. So I would call this meaning of events. But if you were saying people are complaining about millennials here, I would give it to you. Students who were taught that uncertainty is a part of scientific inquiry are more likely to be able to think of alternative explanations. This is my causal belief. This is causal, general predictive causality. Political science is the most important topic. I agree, but that's my normative belief. Yeah, okay. I'm gonna work on the defend your answer thing ASAP to figure out why it's not letting you type in there. Strong law and order caused a low rate of crime in the 1990s. That's historic event causality. Abortion rights given in the 1970s led to the existence of fewer criminals in the 1990s. That is not normative, that's historic event causality. Because a person who is pro-life could 100% buy into this causality, that because potential criminals or people who were born into families who didn't want them might be more likely to grow up to be violent criminals later, that is a causal argument. People who could believe that causal argument would still say abortion is wrong, right? I don't know a single pro-life person who would be like, well, since fewer people are dying of violent crimes, it's okay to abort your baby. I was born in 1970 to a 17-year-old mother, so I eked by, somehow, and yet not a violent criminal. All right. Scientific knowledge is decreasing, therefore we should focus on creating more knowledge. I disagree with that normative claim, but that's a normative claim. People with personality disorders are more likely to steal. That's general predictive causality. Professor Baird's syllabus should cover more topics on American public opinion. That's normative. Being spanked as a child caused some judges to be harsher on criminal defendants' rights in the 1980s. I would call that general predictive causality, but the defend your answer could just argue historic event causality. That is really hard because you could look at 1980s, all the judgments that every decision that was made to be either harsh or lenient on a criminal defendant is a lot of cases. And some of those judges were spanked as a child and others were not. If a person has learned how to use evidence for arguments, that means that person is educated. That's meaning of events. All right, I am going to sign off here. I'll wait and see if anybody has any questions, and I'm going to go try to fix that defend your answer section. Does anybody have any last questions? You can email me. I'll be checking into email today, so just let me know. Okay, bye.